Hi and welcome back to video series. This is the 5th video, and thank you so much for joining me today. I'm going to be discussing farming practices. I do believe that this is the real problem here. Sustainability and farming practices. I am not a supporter of only eating vegan. I am not a supporter of only eating vegetarian or paleo or anything. I support a wide variety of systems of eating. And the reason for this is because every single person is different and every single person has different needs. And if we were going to approach the situation by saying absolutely no meat whatsoever, we're going to lose a lot of people in the audience. We're going to lose a lot of listeners. We're going to lose a lot of perspectives that other people have and that other people need to have to feel heard. It is so complex. It is a wild, tangled web that we've weaved throughout the history of time and throughout the history of mankind. We're going up against ancestry. We're going up against thousands and thousands of years of eating animals, of eating a specific way. And so approaching it by saying that you can only be vegan and you can never eat animal meat again, you're really going to miss the point, which I believe is farming practices. I think conventional farming practices are ruthless. And that is the real root of the problem, is that we have been having horrible farming practices. We treat animals like crap. We take advantage of the system of not knowing where our meat comes from. We allow ourselves to be poisoned by conventional farming practices. We eat food without thinking about what that animal eats and not realizing how that affects our body, how that affects disease in the human body. So when we think about Paleolithic, we go back to our ancestors, the great ancestors, and we think, okay, well, how did they eat? Well, they would catch an animal, they would hunt an animal that was grazing off the land. It wasn't fed corn or soy. It was eating grass, typically, especially if we're talking about like buffalo or, cows. We're looking at a whole series of animals that are raised just off the pasture. So they're not getting fed genetically modified food. They're not being sprayed. Their food's not being sprayed with pesticides. They're not being injected with hormones. They're not being injected with antibiotics. We're just eating the animal meat. Okay, so if we eliminate all those other things, then we can get back to a Paleolithic or that kind of diet. But that's not the way it is anymore. And when you go to the grocery store and you try to find meat and you're looking for any kind of meat that you want, you're just like, I'm just looking for something to eat here, and there's a 50% off. It's conventionally farmed food. And when you buy that meat, because it is so separated from you, it's just packaged. It's got a nice little plastic wrap around it and a number that you pay for it. That's all you see. You don't see what the cow went through. You don't see the toxins that are in the fat. You don't get to see it. You don't see the bacteria that's crawling around with it. A lot of vegans look at that and go like, that is diseased meat. And they're right. It is a diseased meat. And we're eating that diseased meat. And we're getting diseases as a result of it. So they absolutely have a point that disease is caused from meat. Because most of the time it is. It's not the only reason for disease, but it's a huge reason why we're getting so sick. Because the animal meat is sick. And then it's full of bacteria because it's sitting in plastic and it's has bacteria proliferating all over it. So yes, it is toxic to eat. Not to mention that all the toxins the animal eat is stored in their fat. That's why we're told to cut off the fat. It isn't because it causes cardiovascular disease, not directly, not the fat itself, but it's because the fat is so toxic that it, causes heart disease. So when we think about pasture-raised, grass-fed animal meat that isn't being fed genetically modified food and is just eating, grass and bugs, we can understand that meat is far healthier, especially on an energetic level. The animals that are raised on a pasture get to roam the land. They go from green pasture to green pasture and have hundreds of acres to roam. They live a fairly good life. I mean, pretty good life considering we probably live a far more toxic life. So yeah, they live a pretty good life. And yes, they get eaten. But aside from the point that there is a predator-prey scenario going on here, there is a life that they're living that is good, and the energy that they're being fed, the energy that the sunlight that they're getting, the ability to walk around and roam freely, all that energy is going into the animal. And then when you eat that animal, you are eating a more healthier energy versus the conventionally farmed cows or conventionally farmed meats. And the damage that goes on during conventional farming, the toxins that go on, the environmental aspect of problems that occur as a result of these farming practices. The animals are abused, the energy that they have, the fear that they have. You're eating all of that and all those toxins that are in that meat. Yes, that is a very diseased meat. It is also a very diseased way of living. It is also a very diseased practice that humans have that is torturous to the animals. It's torturous to our planet. It is not sustainable. And so the vegan aspect of going plant-based on that end will help many people do very well in life and to have healthier bodies. So there is a very good point that is being made, and that is the point that I want to talk about, is the sustainable farming practices. If you were to go to a farm that had conventionally raised pigs, you probably would cry and run the other direction. I'm doubtful that most of you would even sit down and go, okay, we're going to kill this pig right here in front of you, and we're going to carve him up, and we're going to plate them. Aside from the humane aspect of like, oh yeah, that's just gross, I don't want to eat that pig, I know that, I've seen that pig. Some of you may not care, but for most of us, we would look at that and go, wow, I don't have a stomach for that right now. Aside from that part, that can't be removed. That's like the empathetic side of us. We wouldn't want to eat that meat. If we were sitting there watching how they're living and we're really looking at the situation, we wouldn't want to eat that pig because we see them being scarred. We see them barely having room to move. We look at that and we see them their food being sprayed, and we see the kind of food that they're eating and how it's being hauled, and a little light bulb might click in our heads and we'll think, yeah, that doesn't really look that appealing to me. Now, if you see the pig roaming around and running through the mud on a big, huge farm, just living a happy life, you probably wouldn't want to eat that either, because you'd be like, well, I'm taking that pig's happy life right now. But if you were to have to choose one of the two, you'd probably be like, well, that pig seems a lot healthier and they're eating a lot better. I think I'd rather eat that pig over the other pig. Moral judgments aside, if you had to eat some meat, or if you really wanted pork, or if you really loved it, you go like, well, that pig's like, is it everything? Is it okay? Is it their time? You're like, yeah. I'm like, well, I'd rather eat that because it's healthier. I mean, look at the food that they're eating. It seems more natural, and less fear. So you see the happy pig playing around. You'd want to eat that over the other over the other choice. Me personally, I wouldn't want to eat either, because I just can't get over the fact of eating a pig in general. But there is a purpose for that right now, and therefore we should be supporting the farmers that do those practices, the meat that does cost more money, because ultimately we shouldn't be eating that much meat anyway. We need to lower our amount of meat that we're eating, because eating meat at every single meal just really isn't healthy for the digestive system. And we're seeing also those effects that are occurring on top of the disease. So we may not see disease for like 20, 30 years, although it's happening much sooner than it has ever happened. But we're also seeing the digestive aspects, the autoimmune diseases, the leaky gut, the celiac, all of that stuff. And it's not just caused by grains, it's caused by lots of things. But digestion alone is a huge factor. And when we eat meat, it takes time to digest. Just like a lion in the wild eats his meat or gets his prey, he doesn't eat meat for a whole month. Yet here we are eating meat meal after meal after meal, and that does affect our digestive system. So if we didn't need to eat meat at every single meal, and maybe we only ate meat once or twice a week, we could support the farming practices of the sustainability that the better farming practices have, the sustainable farming practices have, where they're letting the pigs roam wild and free and pasture raised, grass fed, whatever. Those practices, those farming practices, are something you'd want to support over the conventional farming practices, which don't even add to your health. They take away from your health. You don't even get good energy from it. It's bad energy. And it's toxic. So the more we navigate towards the other side of the spectrum, the sustainable farming practices, the more beneficial it becomes for our planet, the better beneficial it becomes for our bodies, the more beneficial it is for the human race, for lessening the disease. And then also we can approach the style of how much meat we're eating. So some people may not need to eat meat at all, and they can be vegetarian or vegan. But then there are some people who are going to want to eat meat. I mean, there are so many people out there who are just not going to give up meat right now, and that's okay. We really just need to start moving all of the farming practices towards sustainability, so that we can support those individuals who do want to eat meat, who have the needs for all the reasons that they may have, with having an open mind. We can understand that the real root of the problem is farming practices as far as meat goes, and animal cruelty, and that goes with the farming practices, the sustainability, the toxins that get into the environment. When you are farming on a land with like hundreds of acres for cows to roam, and there's like 2.5 acres per cow, the farming practices change. The way the landscapes are altered, they are not altered the same way. They are more natural, because that's how animals roam. That's the way it was. So creating space for the animal, creating space for nature, allowing the animals to eat the foods that they were eating less animal meat, will support sustainability. So this is just with animal meat. And so the same thing goes with like whether you get chickens and you were eating chicken eggs, pasture raised chicken eggs, organic, preferably not corn fed, not soy fed. You don't need those hormones. I mean, how many eggs are you eating? People eat dozens of eggs. So to not have those additional hormones on top of all the other hormones that we're getting in our systems, it helps reduce the risk of disease. It helps to allow our hormones to be in balance. It allows the toxins to not build up into our body as much. If we're eating mostly plant-based and we have a little bit of meat here and there, that creates more of a balance. That's really the point I'd like to stress and to really drive home, is that the biggest problem here is the way farming is done and the way those practices are affecting our society. and the environment. So when I have my clients and I talk to my clients, I let them decide what kind of lifestyle they want to live, and I help them understand that the choices they make affect them and how they affect them, so they can become more aware. So whether it is they want to eat vegan or they want to eat vegetarian or whatever, whatever, I support each person individually, because each person has different set of needs based off of their history of what they've experienced in life or they've been taught, and to give them the facts and to get them to know to understand and to be aware of what it is that they're deciding on, and to make an informed decision. Not just telling them you can only be plant-based, because that doesn't work for everybody, and it shouldn't have to work for everybody. What really needs to happen is just the change in agriculture, the change in way we perform our farming practices. We have to change our practices because it's not working anymore, and it hasn't been working for a while. So thank you again for taking the time to watch my video, and I really appreciate it.